The fall of the Empress, the galaxy had known her name in fear. Empress Zhyra of the Selnari Empire was not a ruler of mercy. She was a storm in human shape. Her voice could make generals fall to their knees, and her gaze could silence entire councils. Planets had burned at her command, and worlds had surrendered before her fleets arrived. She was called the Iron Star, a title she wore with pride. Yet, even the strongest star burns out when arrogance blinds it. That night, Zhyra's flagship, the Obsidian Crown, drifted above the edge of the Orion Rift, a dark region of space forbidden to all. The Empress stood before a window of black glass, watching the endless void beyond. Her mind was restless. She had just conquered another rebel world. Millions had knelt, and yet she felt nothing. Victory had become empty. Her court whispered behind her back. Some feared her, some plotted against her, but no one dared show it. The ship's captain entered the throne chamber, trembling as always. "Your Majesty, scanners detect a storm of debris ahead, a meteor cluster, unstable." "Then move through it," she said coldly. "Do not waste my time with stones." The captain hesitated, but her golden eyes glowed faintly, an unspoken threat. He obeyed. The ship changed course toward the storm. Outside, small fragments began to strike the shields, glowing like fireflies against glass. Then came the first impact. The ship shuddered. Another hit, stronger this time. The floor trembled. "Stabilize the core," the captain shouted. "Shields dropping to 60%. Zhyra frowned. The lights flickered. A deep rumble echoed through the halls. She stepped forward, gripping the armrest of her command chair. "You dare bring chaos into my presence?" She hissed at the trembling crew, but the universe didn't care for her power. A blinding flash tore through space. The Obsidian Crown spun violently as a massive meteor sliced through its hull. Fire erupted down the corridor. Soldiers screamed. The vacuum alarm screamed louder. "Seal the decks," shouted someone. "Hull breach in Sector 9. Zhyra tried to stand, but the blast threw her across the chamber. Pain burst through her shoulder as metal shards sliced through her armor. She struggled up, coughing, smoke filling her lungs. The royal guards ran to her aid, one carrying a plasma shield to block falling debris. "We must get you to the escape pod, my Empress." One yelled. "I will not run," she spat. "This is my ship." The floor cracked. The ceiling tore open like paper. A rush of flame consumed the bridge. One guard pushed her toward the corridor, sacrificing himself as the blast swallowed him whole. The Empress stumbled, blinded by the glare. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had never allowed herself to feel. Fear. Her footsteps echoed through collapsing halls. The sound of alarms mixed with the screams of dying soldiers. The Obsidian Crown, symbol of her empire's power, was breaking apart around her. She reached the pod chamber, barely standing, blood dripping from her temple. Only one pod remained functional. She looked back one last time. Through the smoke, she saw the Empire's insignia. Her insignia burning away on the wall. The golden wings of Selnari turned black before her eyes. "Launch sequence ready," said the pod's mechanical voice. Zhyra pressed her trembling hand to the control. The hatch closed. She was thrown back as the pod shot away, leaving behind the flaming wreck of her empire's pride. Hours passed. Darkness, silence. Then, impact. The pod slammed into a thick forest on an unknown world. Trees splintered, fire spread across the ground, and metal groaned as the capsule cracked open. Zhyra crawled out, her silver armor torn and covered in mud. The air was heavy and strange, filled with scents she couldn't name. Gravity felt stronger than she was used to. She stumbled to her feet, looking up at the night sky. No stars she recognized. Her communication chip sparked and died. She was truly alone. Her once glorious crown lay shattered beside her, half buried in dirt. The Empress of 1,000 worlds now stood helpless under alien skies, her empire millions of miles away, perhaps already assuming her dead. Zhyra clenched her fists, her pride the only thing still unbroken. "I am Empress Zhyra," she whispered through blood and smoke, "and I will not fall to this primitive world. But as the forest wind howled and the fire dimmed, her voice trembled. Somewhere far off, unseen eyes were watching the flames. A human man, drawn by the light in the sky, was already walking toward her crash site, unaware that the fate of two species was about to change forever. The human, in the shadows Elias Reed, had long stopped looking at the stars. Once he had flown among them, a pilot in the Earth Defense Force, but war had left him hollow. Now he lived quietly in the forest near the mountains, repairing old machines and trapping small game to survive. His only companions were the wind, the fire, and the echo of things he tried to forget. That night, as he sat by the fire sharpening his old knife, a streak of light tore through the clouds. It wasn't a falling star. It moved too fast, too bright. The ground trembled, and a thunderous boom rolled across the valley. Birds fled from the trees, and a thin trail of smoke began to rise from deep in the woods. Elias stood up immediately. "That wasn't natural," he muttered. Years of instinct returned like an old wound reopening. He grabbed his flashlight, slung his rifle across his back, and began walking toward the smoke. The forest was dark and quiet except for the crackle of burning wood. When he reached the clearing, the air smelled of metal and ozone. And then he saw it. A massive structure half buried in the ground, glowing faintly blue. It looked like a ship, but not one built by human hands. Its hull shimmered with strange symbols that moved like living light. Elias stepped closer, heart pounding. He'd seen alien crafts during the war, but never this close. Most were distant threats. Explosions in the sky, news on a screen. But this was here, in front of him, broken and real. As he circled the wreck, a faint sound reached his ears. Not metal, not fire. It was breathing, ragged, weak, and pained. He froze, his light scanning the wreckage. Then he saw her. A figure lay half outside the cracked hull. Tall, elegant, covered in silver-blue armor scorched by fire. Her hair, white as frost, was tangled with dirt and blood. Her skin had a pale glow, almost unreal. And even as she bled, she still looked like something divine. Or dangerous. Elias knelt beside her. Her eyes opened suddenly, burning gold, fierce and terrified. She hissed in a language he couldn't understand and tried to reach for the weapon strapped to her side. But her hand trembled too much. The blade fell from her grip. "Easy," Elias said softly, raising his hands to show he wasn't a threat. "I'm not going to hurt you." Her voice came out like a snarl. "Back, away, human." He blinked, shocked that she spoke his language at all. But her words were slurred, weak. He could see she was bleeding heavily, a deep wound along her ribs, glowing faintly blue. "You'll die if I do that," he said. She glared at him. "Then let it be so." Elias sighed. "Not on my watch." Ignoring the weapon still within her reach, he tore his jacket into strips and pressed them against her wound. She flinched violently, trying to push him away, but her strength failed. Her eyes flickered, confusion replacing anger for just a moment. "Why? Help? Me?" "Because you're alive," he said simply. That's reason enough, her breath caught. No one in her empire had ever spoken to her like that. In her world, mercy was weakness, compassion was death. Yet this human looked at her as if she were something worth saving. The sound of collapsing metal made him look up. Flames licked the wreckage and the air grew hotter. "We have to move," Elias said. He slid his arms beneath her carefully. She tried to resist, but her body refused to obey. When he lifted her, her head rested against his shoulder, her armor cold, her breath shallow. He carried her through the forest, his boots sinking in mud. The path was long, and her weight felt heavier with every step, but he didn't stop. The storm that had started now poured rain over them, hissing against the fire left behind. After what felt like hours, they reached his cabin, a small wooden structure hidden between the trees. He laid her on the old couch by the fire. Her body was shaking, her pulse weak. He removed what was left of her armor and began cleaning the wounds as best as he could. When she opened her eyes again, she saw him sitting by her side, exhaustion in his face but no fear. The flames reflected in his eyes, warm and steady. She whispered something in her language, too quiet to catch, then closed her eyes again. Elias leaned back, exhaling deeply. "Whatever you are," he murmured, "you're safe here." Outside, thunder echoed across the valley, and the wreck of the Empress's ship continued to burn in the rain. But within the cabin, for the first time in her life, the vicious Empress of the Stars slept. Not on a throne of gold, but on a simple couch, under the watch of a human who didn't even know her name. The Empress in chains of weakness. When Empress Zhyra woke, the first thing she felt was warmth. Soft, strange warmth that wrapped around her body. It took her several seconds to understand that she was not in her ship, not in her throne, and not surrounded by guards or servants. The air smelled of smoke, wood, and something earthy. Her eyes fluttered open. The ceiling above her was made of rough planks. Faint light danced across them, coming from a small fire burning in a corner. The bed she lay on was uneven, made from cloth and old fabric. Her armor was gone and her body was covered with a blanket. Panic surged through her veins. She tried to sit up, but pain exploded in her side, the wound from the crash. She gritted her teeth, a low growl escaping her lips. The sound alerted Elias, who was sitting by the fire repairing a broken metal tool. He turned quickly. "Hey, easy," he said, raising his hands calmly. "You shouldn't move yet." Zhyra glared at him. Her eyes, once the color of molten gold, now flickered weakly. "Where am I?" she demanded, her voice still heavy with authority, even in weakness. "My cabin," he replied. "You were half dead when I found you. You'd have bled out if I hadn't patched you up." She blinked, confused. "You helped me?" "Yeah," he said simply. "That's what people do." Her mind rebelled at his words. In her empire, weakness was punished. No one gave without expecting something in return. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. "Gold? Power? Technology?" Elias chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Lady, I live in the woods. I don't even have a working radio. I just didn't want to watch someone die." She stared at him, searching his face for deceit. But there was nothing there, only calm sincerity. It unsettled her. She looked away, pretending not to care. Hours passed in silence. The fire crackled. Outside, rain tapped softly on the wooden roof. Zhyra watched him as he moved around the cabin, his every action quiet, patient. He cooked something in a metal pot, the smell strange but not unpleasant. Her stomach growled, betraying her. He noticed. Without a word, he poured soup into a cup and brought it to her. "Eat," he said. She looked at the cup as if it were poison. "You dare order me?" He raised an eyebrow. "If I didn't, you'd starve." For a moment, she considered throwing it at him. But hunger won. She took it, sipping carefully. It was warm, soft, and comforting. She hated that feeling. It reminded her of something she had forgotten long ago. Safety. When she finished, she leaned back exhausted. Elias sat down across from her, studying her armor pieces stacked beside the wall. "That's some serious tech," he said. "Who are you really?" Her eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't believe me. Try me." "I am Empress Zhyra of the Selnari Empire," she said proudly. "Ruler of 63 star systems." Elias blinked. Then he laughed softly. "Well, that explains the attitude." Her face hardened. "You mock me." He shook his head. "No, I just think titles don't matter much when you're bleeding in a forest, do they?" For a second, silence filled the room. Her pride flared, but deep inside, his words struck something she didn't want to admit. He was right. On her throne, she had been untouchable. Here, she couldn't even stand without help. That night, when Elias fell asleep in the chair beside the fire, Zhyra tried to move again. She pushed the blanket aside and slowly stood up, gripping the edge of the wall. Her legs trembled. She took one step, then another, but pain stabbed through her ribs. She gasped, losing balance. Before she hit the floor, strong arms caught her. Elias was awake instantly. "Hey, what did I tell you?" "Let me go," she hissed, humiliated. He didn't. "You'll tear your stitches," he said firmly. She tried to push him away, but his grip was steady, his tone calm. Not fearful, not submissive, just steady. He guided her back to the bed. "You don't have to prove anything," he said quietly. "You just need to heal." Her breath trembled. For a long time she didn't reply. Then she whispered, "On my world. No one touches me." He looked at her, puzzled. "Seems like a lonely world." Zhyra turned her head away, eyes glimmering faintly in the firelight. No one had ever dared speak to her like that. Not even her generals. There was no fear in his voice, no flattery either. Just honesty. It was disarming in a way no weapon could be. As the night deepened, Zhyra lay awake, staring at the wooden ceiling. She thought of her empire, her throne, her soldiers who worshipped her as a god. Yet here she was, weak, human-like, saved by a man who expected nothing. Her pride told her to hate him, but a quiet, forgotten part of her heart felt something else, and for the first time in her life, the Empress of Fear felt truly unsure of who she was. The edge of fear days turned into weeks, and the mighty Empress Zhyra remained trapped within the wooden walls of that small cabin, a prisoner not of chains but of her own weakness. Her wounds had begun to heal, but her pride had not. Each sunrise reminded her of what she had lost: her empire, her soldiers, her control. She despised the feeling of being powerless. Yet every time she tried to rise again, her body betrayed her. Elias continued to care for her without complaint. He repaired her armor piece by piece, studied the strange circuits inside it, and gathered herbs from the forest to treat her wounds. Sometimes he would talk about the world, about Earth, the wars it had fought, the mistakes humans had made. Zhyra listened quietly, pretending not to care, but deep down she was curious. Humans were fragile compared to her kind. Yet this one spoke of loss and pain as if it were a teacher, not a curse. One evening, as the sun vanished behind the mountains, Elias was chopping wood outside when he heard her voice call sharply. "Human," he sighed. "Name's Elias," he muttered and walked in. She stood, barely balanced, wearing a torn piece of her armor on her shoulder. "You will assist me in repairing the ship," she declared. "We leave this planet at dawn." Elias looked at her calmly. "You can barely stand. I command you." She snapped, her golden eyes blazing. "I am Empress Zhyra of the 63 star systems," he interrupted, finishing her sentence. "Yeah, I remember." He placed the axe by the door and met her furious gaze without flinching. "But out here there are no empires. Just two people trying to survive." Zhyra's lips tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No fear, no bowing, no hesitation. She wanted to strike him, to remind him who she was. But her arm trembled before she could even lift it. Her anger broke into exhaustion. She turned away, collapsing into the chair near the fire. For a long moment, only silence filled the cabin, broken by the crackle of burning wood. Then Elias said softly, "You don't have to fight me. Not everything is a war." Her voice was low. "You know nothing of my world." "You're right," he said. "But I know what it's like to lose everything you thought made you strong." She looked up slowly. His eyes carried a heaviness she recognized. Not weakness, but memory. He didn't tell her his story, but she could feel it between his words, the kind of pain that left scars no one could see. Later that night, the forest began to whisper with wind. The sky darkened, and distant thunder rumbled like drums of war. A storm was coming. Zhyra stood near the window, watching lightning split the sky. She had faced battles that destroyed worlds, yet the sound of the storm made her chest tighten. When thunder cracked directly above the cabin, she flinched violently. The flash reminded her of the explosion that destroyed her ship. The screams, the fire, the weight of falling steel. She stepped back, trembling, her breathing fast. The Empress of the Stars, trembling like a child. Elias turned at once. "Hey, it's just thunder," he said gently. "Stay back." She snapped, her voice breaking, but the storm grew worse. Rain hammered the roof, and lightning illuminated her pale face. She covered her ears and crouched by the wall, eyes wide with terror she didn't understand. Elias walked toward her slowly, keeping his voice calm. "You're safe here. Nothing's going to hurt you." She shook her head. I cannot." Her voice faltered. "The fire, the crash. I see it again." Without another word, Elias sat beside her. He didn't touch her at first, just waited. When she finally looked at him, lost and shivering, he draped a blanket around her shoulders and whispered, "Even the strongest can break. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you alive." Something inside her cracked, not from pain, but from the strange warmth of those words. No soldier had ever spoken to her with such gentleness. No one ever had the courage to comfort her. She looked at him, eyes glistening. "Why do you not fear me?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because I don't see a monster. I see someone trying to remember how to live." The thunder rolled again, but she didn't hide this time. She stayed where she was, wrapped in silence beside him. The firelight flickered across her face, the face that once commanded fear across the stars, now softened by the reflection of human kindness. When the storm finally passed, Zhyra spoke in a quiet voice. "On my world, they taught me that fear is control, that to rule, one must never show weakness. But when I was afraid tonight, you didn't use it against me." Elias looked at her gently. "That's because here, strength isn't about control. It's about what you protect." For the first time, she smiled, a small, unsure smile that felt strange on her lips. It wasn't the smile of an empress. It was the smile of someone who had finally begun to see what it meant to be human. Outside, the storm faded into calm, and the stars broke through the clouds. Zhyra looked up at them through the window. Somewhere out there, her empire still waited for its queen. But in that moment, under the soft light of Earth's sky, the Empress of Fear began to change, piece by fragile piece, into something far greater. The hunt from the stars. The peace of the forest did not last long. It began with a faint hum one evening, so soft that Elias almost mistook it for the wind. But Zhyra froze instantly. Her golden eyes flickered, and every muscle in her body tensed. "That sound," she whispered, "it's not Earth's wind. It's a scanner." Elias frowned. "Scanner?" Her face hardened. "They found me." She rushed to the door, ignoring the pain in her ribs, and looked toward the night sky. There, just above the treetops, faint blue lights moved slowly in a search pattern. The air shimmered with their energy. Small drones, shaped like metallic insects, drifted through the clouds, sweeping beams of light across the ground. Zhyra's heart pounded. "Selnari trackers," she said. "They're searching for the crash site. If they detect my life signature, they'll send a retrieval squad." "That sounds like a good thing," Elias said. "Won't they save you?" Her expression darkened. "No. If they find me in this state, wounded, stripped of power, they will execute me. The Empire cannot be seen with a weak ruler. It would mean rebellion." Elias stared at her in disbelief. "They'd kill their own empress?" She nodded slowly. "The throne must look unbreakable, even if it means destroying its queen." Outside, the lights grew brighter. The sound of engines echoed faintly through the valley. Zhyra looked at Elias, her voice steady but urgent. "We must hide. If they detect heat or motion, they'll destroy this place." Elias didn't argue. He grabbed his rifle, threw a blanket over the fire, and began packing what little he could carry. Zhyra tried to help but stumbled, still too weak. He caught her before she fell, steadying her with a firm grip. "You're not doing this alone," he said. They slipped out the back door and moved through the trees, guided by the faint silver light of the moon. The forest was alive with strange shadows. The alien drones passed overhead, their lights slicing through the branches. Elias pulled Zhyra down behind a fallen log as one drone hovered near them, scanning the ground. The beam passed inches from her face. Elias held his breath, his hand instinctively covering hers. For the first time, she didn't pull away. When the drone drifted off, she exhaled shakily. "You risked your life for me," she murmured. "Why?" Elias whispered, "Because that's what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves." Zhyra stared at him for a moment, as if seeing him for the first time. Not as a fragile creature, but as something quietly unbreakable. They continued deeper into the woods until the sound of the drones faded. But when they reached a ridge overlooking the valley, Zhyra's eyes widened in horror. Below, in the clearing where her ship had crashed, a full Selnari patrol had landed. Sleek, silver ships floated above the wreck, and armored soldiers moved with precision. One of them, tall with sharp angular armor, stood at the center, issuing orders. Zhyra recognized him immediately. "General Varric," she whispered. "My second in command." Elias studied her face. "You trust him?" She shook her head slowly. "He was loyal only to power. If he learns I'm alive, he'll finish what the storm started." Varric's voice echoed faintly through a communicator, carried by the wind. The Empress's pod signal was last detected in this region. "Search every square meter. If you find her remains, burn them. If she lives, end it." Elias clenched his jaw. "They sound more like hunters than soldiers." Zhyra's heart pounded painfully. She could almost feel the weight of every life she had commanded, every cruel order she had given. Now the same cruelty had turned against her. The Empress of Fear was now the prey. When the soldiers began moving up the ridge, Elias turned to her. "We need to move again." She shook her head. "No, they will find us. The drones will track our heat signatures." Her eyes glimmered with resolve. "I will draw them away." "Like hell you will," Elias said firmly. "You can't even run properly." "I won't let you die because of me," she snapped. "And I won't let you die because you think you have to face this alone," he shot back. Their eyes locked, anger, fear, and something unspoken burning between them. Then a drone beam cut across the trees behind them. The soldiers were close. Elias grabbed her hand. "This way!" They ran through the rain-soaked woods, branches whipping at their faces. Blaster fire tore through the darkness. Elias fired back with his rifle, taking down one drone. Another beam scorched a tree beside them, sending sparks into the air. Zhyra stumbled, but Elias caught her again, dragging her toward a rocky outcrop. They ducked behind it as an explosion lit the night. Smoke and dust filled the air. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was their heavy breathing. Then Zhyra whispered, "No one has ever stood beside me in battle. Not like this." Elias looked at her, his face smeared with dirt and rain. "Then maybe it's time someone did." Somewhere in the distance, Varric's soldiers continued their sweep, unaware that the woman they hunted was no longer the tyrant they once served. As the rain poured and the forest burned with scattered embers, Zhyra looked at Elias, this fragile human who defied her empire's logic. And for the first time in her life, she understood that courage was not born from fear. It was born from love. The Empress of Fear was no longer running from death. She was running toward a new life. The choice of the Empress. The forest had become a battlefield of shadows and light. Search drones swept through the trees like glowing insects, and the air hummed with the sound of alien engines. Zhyra and Elias crouched behind a fallen trunk, their breaths short and heavy. The rain had turned to mist, and every sound seemed louder than it should. Zhyra's sharp senses caught the low hum of approaching footsteps. Disciplined, precise. "They're close," she whispered. Varric's elite guard. Elias checked his rifle. The weapon looked small compared to the technology that hunted them, but his eyes were calm. "Then we stand our ground," she turned to him sharply. "You don't understand. These soldiers were trained to kill without hesitation. You can't fight them," he gave a faint smile. "I fought worse. Besides, I'm not running again." Her heart tightened. The words reminded her of something long buried. Her own vow as a young queen before power consumed her. To protect, not to destroy. To lead, not to rule by fear. Somewhere along the way, she had lost that promise. The soldiers appeared through the fog, their armor gleaming under the faint moonlight. At their front stood General Varric, his tall frame unmistakable. His voice cut through the silence, cold and sharp. "Empress Zhyra, I expected your ashes, not your breath." Zhyra rose slowly, her silver cloak wet and torn, her hair clinging to her face. But her gaze, her golden gaze, burned with the fire of a storm. "Varric," she said calmly, "you will stand down." The general chuckled, stepping forward. "You taught me never to kneel to weakness. The Empire cannot afford an empress who bleeds." Elias raised his rifle. "Back off!" Varric's eyes shifted to him, filled with disdain. "A human? Is this what you've become, my empress? A fugitive hiding with vermin?" Elias didn't hesitate. "Say one more word and you'll find out what vermin can do." Zhyra could feel the tension burning between them. The soldiers aimed their weapons, waiting for Varric's signal. The forest held its breath. For a moment, everything seemed frozen in time, two worlds colliding in silence. Then Varric gave the order. "Kill the human." The shot came fast, a beam of blue light streaking through the mist. Without thinking, Zhyra moved. Her instincts, once born of cruelty, now drove her to protect. She stepped between Elias and the blaster's path. The beam struck her shoulder, burning through flesh and armor. She fell to her knees, gasping, the scent of scorched metal in the air. Elias caught her before she hit the ground. "Zhyra!" She gritted her teeth, blood glimmering faintly blue. Her voice trembled, but her eyes burned with fury. "Enough!" she roared, the power in her tone shaking the trees. Varric froze. Even wounded, her presence still commanded the stars. "You think strength is killing the weak?" she said, rising slowly. "You think fear builds loyalty? You learned nothing from me." Her armor glowed faintly as she drew power from the strange device on her wrist. The remaining shards of her Empress energy core flared, painting her body in gold light. The forest was suddenly alive with energy. Ancient, powerful, unstoppable. She stood tall, wounded but unbroken. "I am not the Empress you remember," she said. "I am not your weapon anymore," Varric sneered. "Then you are nothing." "Perhaps," she whispered, "but even nothing can save someone worth more than an empire." Before Varric could react, she raised her hand, channeling the last of her power. A wave of golden light surged forward, disarming the soldiers and hurling them back. Trees bent from the blast. Elias shielded his face as the ground trembled. When the light faded, only silence remained. Zhyra collapsed, her energy spent. Elias rushed to her, cradling her in his arms. "Stay with me." Her breathing was shallow, but she smiled faintly. "You humans are so strange," she whispered. "You fight with no armor, love with no fear." "Don't talk," he said, his voice cracking. "We'll stop the bleeding." She looked at him, her golden eyes dimming slightly. "Varric will return with more ships. If I live, they'll never stop. But if they believe I'm dead..." Elias understood before she finished. "You want to disappear?" She nodded weakly. "You can't fight an empire, Elias, but maybe we can teach it something greater than fear." He shook his head, tears mixing with the rain. "You're not dying here. Not after everything." She reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek, cold but gentle. "You gave me what my empire never could. Choice." In the distance, the sky burned faintly with the glow of departing ships. The Selnari patrol, believing their Empress destroyed, retreated into the clouds. Zhyra's body relaxed, her power fading completely. Elias held her close, whispering, "It's over. You're safe now," but she smiled faintly. "No. Now I'm free." Her eyes closed and the forest fell silent again. For a long moment Elias thought she was gone. But then her chest rose, shallow but steady. She was alive. Barely. He lifted her gently and carried her back toward the cabin, every step heavy with exhaustion and resolve. Behind them, the stars above flickered, as if bowing farewell to the woman who had once ruled them in fear and was now reborn in sacrifice. The Empress who had built an empire on terror had chosen compassion instead. And in that single choice, she had rewritten her destiny. The Empress of Hope. The morning came softly, with light filtering through the forest mist. The storm had passed, leaving behind a calm that felt almost sacred. Elias sat by the bedside in his cabin, watching over the woman who had once commanded an empire. Zhyra's breathing was weak but steady, her silver skin pale beneath the blanket. For days, he had done everything to keep her alive, changing her bandages, feeding her water drop by drop, whispering to her even when she didn't respond. He hadn't slept properly. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her stepping in front of the blaster beam, shielding him without hesitation. The image burned in his mind. The moment a being who once ruled through fear had chosen love instead. It was nearly dawn when she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, golden irises dim but alive. For a moment, she looked lost, like someone waking from a long dream. Then she saw him. "Elias," she whispered. He exhaled in relief, smiling. "You're back." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "So, I lived, barely," he said. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." Zhyra looked at the cabin, the small fire, the wooden walls. "So this is what life feels like when no one bows to you." He chuckled softly. "Feels lighter, doesn't it?" She nodded weakly. "It feels real." For the next few days, her strength slowly returned. Elias stayed close, helping her walk again, guiding her to the doorway where she could sit and feel the morning sun. The forest was green and quiet, birds singing above, a world untouched by war or empire. Zhyra watched it with silent awe. She had conquered countless worlds but had never seen one this way. Alive, peaceful, unafraid. Sometimes she asked about Earth's people. Do they always fight? She wondered one evening as the two watched the sunset. "Sometimes," Elias replied, "but more often we try to rebuild what we break. It's what makes us human." She looked down at her hands, still faintly glowing. "Maybe that's why the universe fears your kind. You destroy, but you also create. You lose, and still hope again." He smiled. "You sound like you're starting to understand us." "Perhaps," she said quietly. "Or maybe I'm starting to understand myself." At night, she dreamed of her empire, the cold metal halls, the endless silence of power, the faces of those who obeyed her out of terror. And then she saw Elias, standing in front of her, unbowed, unbroken, offering kindness instead of submission. When she woke, tears glimmered in her eyes, something no one in her empire had ever seen. One evening, as the fire crackled, Zhyra looked at the stars through the open window. The sky was clear, and far beyond it she could sense the faint pulse of her people, still out there, still afraid of her memory. "They think I'm dead," she said softly. Elias nodded. "That's probably for the best." "Yes," she agreed. "For them. And for me." He studied her face in the firelight. "Do you ever want to go back?" Her answer came after a long silence. "No, not as I was. If I return one day, it will not be to rule. It will be to heal what I broke." He smiled. "Then you'll need time. Maybe a lifetime." She looked at him, her eyes soft. "Then I will spend that lifetime here, learning how to be something better." The days that followed were peaceful. Together they repaired the cabin, tended a small garden, and gathered food from the forest. Elias taught her simple things: how to cook, how to build traps, how to listen to the sound of rain without fear. Each lesson became a thread that tied her to humanity, pulling her further from the person she once was. Sometimes when she laughed, truly laughed, Elias would stop and just listen. It was strange, hearing joy in the voice that once commanded destruction. He often thought she looked more human than alien when she smiled. One morning, months later, she stood at the edge of the forest, watching the sunrise. The light reflected off her silver skin, painting her in gold. She closed her eyes, feeling the warmth on her face. "Do you know what this feels like?" she asked. Elias joined her. "Home," she nodded, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes, home." For the first time in her life, she wasn't an empress, a weapon, or a ruler. She was simply Zhyra, a soul reborn in the heart of a human world. That night, as the stars rose again, she sat beside the fire and looked at Elias. "There's one thing I don't understand," she said. "You humans, you live so short and yet you give so much. You risk everything for people you don't even know." "Why?" Elias smiled gently. "Because what's the point of living forever if you never truly live?" Her golden eyes shimmered with quiet wonder. She reached out, taking his hand. "Then perhaps it was fate that I fell to this world." He squeezed her hand gently. "Or maybe the universe just wanted to remind you, even an empress can have a heart." Above them, the night sky glittered with endless stars. Somewhere out there, the Selnari Empire mourned the death of their queen. But here on Earth, under the soft glow of the moon, a new story was being written. Not of fear and domination, but of love, redemption, and hope. The galaxy would one day learn the truth, that the most powerful force in the universe was not war. but compassion, and thus ended the legend of the vicious Empress, reborn not as a tyrant but as the Empress of Hope.